So, my dear colleagues, we have a wonderful topic for discussion. Today we're discussing Homo technologicus. It is a very interesting topic. Tis not the first wave of techno people that we got. In the 1920s and 30s, we already had the engineering intelligentsia, the first future specialists of the spaceship trajectory and the peaceful atom. And now there's digital economy. Now there's a desire from the country leadership that within the next year we prep 80,000 special IT specialists that know the digital, and then 120,000 IT specialists. And we need to be prepping them at the same time simultaneously. So we have to grow the number of such specialists, and then we catch ourselves thinking, is it 100% of the future success? Or do these specialists, apart from IT and digital, do they need to be prepped for something else? What is a Homo technologicus? I wanted to draw your attention to a book that many of you know real well. It's a book of Martin Neumayer, Meta Skills, 5 Talents for the Robotic Age. And let me remind you, the skills. Empathy and intuition is the first skill. Vision and systematic thinking. The ability to dream and look at the system from the outside in and look beyond the horizon. Third, talent in fulfillment and practice. Fourth and fifth is the ability to learn. And nothing about the deepening of professional competences. Is it a provocation? A person doesn't see that we live in the era of the digital, and the technical immersion is very important, or is it that was something we're losing? And I hope that today that we're going to be able to, if not answer it, but using the 360-degree system, we're going to try to see it. And before I give the floor to the first speaker, to a wonderful person, the Dean of the Computer Sciences of the Higher School of Economics, Ivan Arjantsev, I just want to say to our speakers, in order for us to have the time for a wrap-up, we're speaking around 7 minutes. I'm going to have this timer right here, and when the time going to start approaching, I'm going to remind you I'm not going to give anyone more than 30 seconds to the 7 minutes, so there is time for Q&A. So now the floor is yours. Thanks much. It's my pleasure to be speaking over here, and one of the topics of our discussion is particularly close to me, is the topic of how do you teach something that constantly changes, and it's the task we've been resolving recently, and our department has been created in 2014 at the High School of Economics. It's a joint project between our university and the Yandex. And the whole theme has to do with IT, math, engineering. It only has 10 years at our university, so it's fairly young. But at the same time, the department's growing very rapidly. We've got over 500 people that study with us now at the BA program and 200 people at the MA. But it's not the numbers, but the quality. This year, we've attracted 39 winners of the final Russian math, in computer science and physics Olympiad, and it's the best result because we have the best kids studying with us, so we have to teach them well. We don't have a choice. But if we're looking at now of how and what do we teach, first of all, it is the conservative approach of the universities, because the university has been teaching something that only been teaching for the past 100 years, because we only teach what we can. And the second extreme is the extreme of practicality. It's when we go talk to companies, find out what they need, and teach what they want, but by the time the students graduate, they won't need that anymore. So we need to look for a compromise, for something in the middle. What's our solution? This is base fundamental education the first 2 years, when the students are taught math, programming languages, structure and algorithm of data, something you can't do without. But even those required courses, they change. Because even though there is fundamental base, something changes every year. Let me give you an example out of my practice. I taught the course in the mathematic basis of the protection of information, and I would teach very classic, very things that are very simple, but as a mathematician, some very simple applied things. And then the best students come up to me and say, it's so interesting what you're saying, so good. But then they just said the word that they've been mentioned by a moderator. What skills are we going to get as a result of this course? And then for 2 years after that phrase, I've been catching myself thinking, like, what am I going to do? What are those skills? And that is what the math professors keep being asked this question. Well, why do we need this in computer sciences? And I see my colleagues thinking what to answer to that. When you get to the senior courses at the university, it has to be practice-oriented. And when we get to the MA program, I think the MA finally starts working. It's not the 5th or 6th year that the students automatically get to. It becomes a new educational trajectory. And here it is particularly important to offer the students something that's going to help them work in the particular field. Because in our department, we have an MA program together with Sberbank called Financial Technology and Data Analysis. The kids learned with us or not with us during their BA program. Half the students in MA come from the outside. They know how to program. They know math. They know the basis of the machine learning, and this is where the subject application begins. Or there's a program of the analysis of data in the bioinformatics and the research of genome. It is also a very applied area. If the kids want to start something from first year to learn something additionally and they're ready for it and get some practical courses right away, yeah, they can do that, but it's optional. We offer mini courses. We offer additional courses for the first year students. They can attend them, but only at a condition that they fulfill the nuclear requirement. Another thing I wanted to say here, that there's a question of the educative centers of the company. The Innovert is positioned as a fiasco of the education system because the companies have to create those educational centers because universities, can't catch up. And indeed, it is so sometimes when universities give data that's completely outdated, and the companies have to take it up on themselves, but it's not always an illustration of a problem, because sometimes it's a regular practice when companies at senior years invite students, teach them internally that's specific for this particular company, and pass on the technology that will be required by our senior students and graduates. The question that I know, the Yandex Data Analysis School that's been running from 2007, that is a corporate project, but it's not connected to any universities directly, even though it works together. And we do have some projects together with Yandex. But the school, at first, was called upon to solve the creating the ambience within the community. And the task has been being resolved in the interest of community in general, not just the company. And we feel that because who teach there? Who would teach all the students if we haven't grown the graduates of the School of Data Analysis that now became professors? Thank you. Thank you so very much. You wrapped up exactly on time, even a little bit before that. So what a wonderful tradition from the experience. If there is one question from the audience, if there's one brief question. If no, I'm passing the floor to the next speaker. And I also wanted to throw in a problem that concerns me. My colleague mentioned the word fintech. In the RANEPA, we also have a fintech program. and we do it together with Sberbank for 3 years. When we launched it, Mr. Greff said, we need, for this program, we need to get the people with the equally developed left and right brain hemisphere. And many of you heard, as a management psychologist said, excuse me, Mr. Greff, but they said if they have both hemispheres developed equally, people are not entirely okay. For which Mr. Greff said, for 130 million Russians, I'm sure we'll find 30 people that would be okay and have equally developed hemispheres. And that indeed worked out. I wouldn't say it was easy because when we funnel 800 people and handpick them, but we do find them and they do work. But again, there's a balance between the management software and hardware, between the deep professional knowledge in financial analytics with math and the knowledge of how to communicate with the people. Okay. So, and using this possibility of a moderator, I would like to give the floor to a very interesting person, to the CEO of Gartner in Russia, Gartner Russia, Ms. Maria Vozhegova. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be again at the Central Bank event. And it's a pleasure that an education section I've been invited to, but our company does analytics in IT. And the topics that have to do with teaching competences, the change within the workforce, what competences need to be developed. We're working with a number of large American and European companies in terms of case studies and campus programs in promoting an analysis of technology. What would I like to say a few words about? First of all, if you think about it, life expectancy is growing. We do know that the age of retirement is going. It has nothing to do with the recent pension reform, but what I mean is that when we approach the technologies, changes to the education system, we need to think about that. There's an opinion coming today that my generation, I'm nearly 40 years old, that there's a chance we're going to live for 110 years. At the same time, the retirement age is growing, means that we can get new professions. And also when it comes to this new generation, the Z generation, those who are in the universities today, it's quite possible that those people, even in the technological skills. But if we get closer to the IT market, Wall Street Journal, this June, they ran an interesting publication that in 2017, that the average salary of the worldwide IT specialists across the entire sector was nearly $112,000. So it's one of the top paying jobs in the white collar, together with medicine, lawyers, and so on. But what's interesting is that at the U.S. market, from the beginning of this year, the labor market is changing, and for every 90,000 people, there's a decrease of work spots available in the IT. That's the first. Second, now there's a new generation coming, the Z generation, that has new demands and asks new things of the employer. So it's possible that it makes sense that if we understand that indeed these are the people that are going to work in the digital economy, they have to have new competences. So going back to what the moderator was saying, in terms of the beginning, it's empathy, analytical thinking, the ability to learn. So if we if we want to have new people. Well, no, that's not right. Not new people, but those who can merge and transform a country, or from this, in terms of technology. We have to teach not only technologicus, my opinion, my professional and my personal opinion, that apart from base technological things, and in the technological universities, it's quite possible we need to teach marketing and IT and everything that has to do with culture of communication, culture of the development of social skills, culture of presenting. So when a person that has basic technological knowledge that they can bring into the new career, plus these things, apart from the basic engineering education, they give an opportunity to promote their own ideas. It's not just technological companies, not just industrial companies, but everything that has to do with entrepreneurship. Now, when it comes to Russia, last year and this year as well, we're going to carry on the work that we started. We published an education on the agenda in Russia. We asked all the CEOs of major companies what are their demands, how do they see the digitalization, how do they see the transformation. Going back to the education system in Russia, if we go back to the Soviet Union, I'm a product of the era of the education at the economic department at the Moscow State University. Mathematical methods is something that I was accustomed to. So in terms of the future, the system education of the future, when we have to improve projects, in terms of the 5 best universities, our strengths are the Soviet Union, and this system survived somehow. They taught us to think critically, going back to the initial stepping stone, the Z generation. Apart from the basic skill, we're going to give social aspects, plus the possibility, the ability to think critically, and the desire for continuous education. We're going to create a foundation for change in the digital environment as well. Understanding at the same time that the Z generation, they are different. My son is 12. He can, watching, yeah. He can do a few things at the same time. So going back to the education system, I think we need to add on technical aspects when everything comes to change in culture and social sciences. That's it. The report's over.
Thank you. One question from the audience, if there's any. Or we have our panelists are making their presentations so well that you don't have questions. You won't. Before I give the floor to our third panelist, I'd give a short comment. Our next presenter represents Yandex, a unique company. All my friends divide between the Google fans and Yandex fans. I prefer Yandex. It's not because Yandex representatives are here. I think Yandex is a perfect system. And the question, Yandex has been very active in educating new experts, new specialists. Is it efficient? Well, Yandex has, possibilities to do that. Maybe it's easier to, it's a brand. Maybe one should rather look for or hire experts from all over the country, or maybe one should create an a special system and which won't be part of the university system through Coursera. All the best lectures are available online, and the Minerva University, created as a startup in the US, which is disrupting the contemporary educational system. They are already training people online, and I mean they're providing courses which are better than those of the Ivy League universities. So what does Yandex think? Does university diploma, is it worth anything? Are they ready to work with the people who don't have any university degree? Let's say people like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. As far as I remember, he never got any formal education because he was all into his startups. So I give the floor to a very interesting person, to Mr. Ilya Zaleski, head of educational services at Yandex. Thank you. I felt as a Hollywood star I have to say something very clever in response. I'll start from telling a story of why Yandex decided they wanted to train new people, because it turned out we've hired all the people we knew, so we had to train new people. So partly in answering your question or explaining how do we look at education, it's hard for us to hire people from outside because we need people to comply with our culture. Because we need people not only to have certain skills, we need them to be able to build into the company. It's not only about products we make, but you need to be aware of a whole range of things. So when we do things in an interdisciplinary way, for example, we've launched Yandex Drive car sharing service. It uses Yandex Maps products, and you also have Yandex Auto built into the system. So to make this product, you need to know car sharing. You need to understand how other products work. So you have to be really involved, and you can't make it. I mean, you can't do it fast. You can't learn to do it fast. You need to be inside. So training people for, if you want to train people for tech companies, you need to go to universities and you need to start working with them while they're students. This is exactly what we do through the data analysis school. This school has been working for 11 years already. It's 2 years course. You have theory and practice combined, and practice involves working with Yandex people. And many people who graduate from data analysis school work in Yandex, and over 450 people have worked in Yandex after graduating from this school. I'm talking about skillful engineers, and they worked on key projects that Yandex have launched. They're not developers. They're rather people who have a deep understanding of what's going on, and I'd rather call them engineers. So the first idea I'd have here in answering the question, who is Homo technologicus, I would say it's someone deeply involved in culture. So you can't really train someone who'd be available, who'd be good for Yandex and some other company. You need to train someone who'd be deep into your own culture. Another issue that has been discussed in education, Jamburg, an academician who works in education, recently said that mentioned a figure of the percentage, how many children are healthy when they start schooling. It means that how many children start schooling when they're healthy. It's only 12% of children who start going to school being healthy. So these are the kids that you don't need any special facilities for. I think it's a very important figure. It's a very important number, and we should keep it in mind when we're talking about training personnel. So we have to customize education. Your teacher in class, your professor in the university has to take into account various interests and various requirements and demands of kids. We've recently launched the Yandex textbook project. We're talking about digital textbooks for schools that are based on, customized approach. We're not the only ones doing it. I mean, this is a very topical trend. This is something tech companies are working with. The main challenge here is nobody knows how to do it right. So all companies are searching for the right way to do it. Eventually, you can't teach. I mean, technology doesn't teach you. It's the teacher who teaches you, and it will be like this for many years to come. So when you have a teacher and you have technology, and they should work in synergy together, and the way we can put it together and make it available for our students is a challenge we're trying to answer. And again, individual approach, which is the key factor here. So answering a question whether we need this, higher education. Higher education, in our view, is not the main criteria. We do hire people without higher education, but I mean, people go through selection to start working in Yandex anyway, and it has nothing to do with their degree. So we select them through a series of tests, and whether higher education is good for the people who come, well, we still have a higher percentage of people with higher education working for us, and they have to work with certain mathematical challenges. And of course, I mean, when you're solving some mathematical problems, you need higher education. Can you get higher education online? Can you get a degree online? Well, some people are able to do that, but there are not too many of those. And I don't think everybody can be taught online, and this is not likely to promote the quality of education. You still have the motivation factor. You have top lecturers at the top universities who attract students as personalities, and there are seminars, which is also very important, of startups that were mentioned. I mean, the Minerva startup, they exist as partnership with universities, so they create partners products with the universities, and we realize that it's very important. So and they also realize it's very important. So higher education, is not a must, but it is still a very useful thing. And you can teach outside the university, but nobody has yet come up with their universal model of how you do this. There is another kind of professions in IT. You have 1 minute left. One doesn't really understand how when we say we need 120,000 new people, new IT specialists. I mean, if we don't need 120,000 champions, if we're talking about coders, people who are writing codes, we need more of those, and they can be trained faster. And you can do it outside the university. You can do it through online courses. And the commercial players in the market are doing this, and I think this market will be booming in the coming years, and I think it would be sensible to support it. So this is what will be important for the state as the growth potential. Thank you. And maybe there are questions. There's a question from the audience. Unfortunately, the question is not asked into the mic, so we can't hear it. Well, we cannot know, we cannot assess how fit will the online courses be. Well, in online education, you have a higher, a larger opening, so we can have people entering the course, and some people will drop out, but still the people who remain will we won't be handpicking them, but since there'll be a lot of people entering and not very many people staying until the end, we might have a good selection in terms of risks. We've launched within the data analysis school. We have a department which correspondence, which works through correspondence. But we do have some people who get through, and we need to give a chance for the people who are not able to attend the courses live to have a chance to educate themselves. We also have schools for like groups for school children, for school pupils, high school pupils in programming, and we had a very high competition, and a lot of kids wanted to enter, so we decided to give a chance for them to do it online, and a lot of them actually stay because motivation is so high that kids, maybe with the help of their parents, but maybe on their own, they do get on with this online system and they do graduate. So probably the program depends on how you select. And you should understand that on the initial stage, you have more people wanting to start learning in an online form. Yesterday at the plenary session, there was a question concerning this claim of the Higher School of Economics that plans to transfer their lecturing activities online and allow their professors to do research instead of giving lectures. Well, I don't really have any opinion. It's an experiment that Higher School of Economics is conducting. I guess there are some aspects that should be there to keep the balance. Whether it's going to be successful, I don't know. We need to test it. I don't think that Higher School of Economics will apply to 100% of students. If it is successful, maybe it can be scaled later, but I keep questions from our professors. I mean, it's a revolutionary proposal. We started working on it a couple of years ago, and Higher School of Economics is now leading in terms of the number of people attending its online courses. And our department created 3 English language specializations together with Yandex and together with the San Diego University. Our students send a motivation letter, get access to online courses, and it's a powerful instrument which involves obligatory online components. And we have a very strong feedback in the Higher School of Economics because students are asked to evaluate, to assess every course, and the teachers and professors. And they started to evaluate online courses as well, and they give high marks for online courses as well. Of course, they give different marks to different professors, but in general, it's more or less the same. It's going to go through stages. Part of the courses will be filmed and recorded in video form. We'll see what happens. Higher School of Economics is always ready to embark on new projects, and it usually ends up well. I'll allow myself another comment. It's a very relevant topic today, and the distance programs are becoming more and more accessible and more. At the same time, people of my generation usually see them as programs of lower quality. However, further on, when we're talking of transferring all lectures into online mode, there is another aspect. We need the professors to spend all their time out of class working on projects with students talk to Chernigevskaya, she'll tell you she gives students unsolvable problems and leads them to make them learn how to think out of the box. And we're facing a problem that the majority of Russian universities are facing. Our teachers, our professors know how to work in class, but are not very skillful in working out of class. So how do we retrain our professors and lecturers? Because when you're working on an online course, you can perfect it through projects, and we need to retrain our professors and lecturers. Well, thank you, colleagues. I see we are having a discussion, which is very good. And I'm giving the floor to our next speaker. I'm giving the floor to Konstantin Kozlov, General Director of the National Center for Electronic Education, Rostec. We're talking about some serious education here. And my question in the framework of our discussion would be, Konstantin, in your opinion, will electronic education replace live education? Will it substitute live communication between teachers and students, especially if we're talking about some personalities, leaders? I mean, we see professors as outstanding personalities. Well, good afternoon. So this question sort of is a follow-up to the previous discussion. Remembering our yesterday's session, we're talking about the priority educational project of the Russian Federation, modern digital environment based on the open education platform. And this project is meant to integrate online courses in many forms, not necessarily lectures, but rather courses, narrowly focused courses in different universities. At the same time, online education, even if it's highly efficient, means we're losing students. Universities try to involve students. We've worked with various universities, with ITMO and other, tech universities. They have programs where if the student chooses online education, they're still involved in the team. They're still involved in the group. It means human factor keeps being very, very important. Here we're talking about classical programs, BA, bachelor and master degree programs. So the project is very interesting. I think it will develop, but at present, in terms of the way we work with students, there's a question, how do you identify Ivanov who has completed an online course with the Ivanov you're going to hire? So how do we identify them? We need to ensure a higher degree of identification. And the courses, both for the courses that are within, so the ministry had several approaches to online, and what we ended up with was a cemetery of resources that were not influencing the current educational process. We need to start with high school or secondary school. A lot depends on whom we're working with. People come to IT, people come to digital, and we need to understand here that education doesn't start in higher school, in universities. This is what we keep forgetting. We, as biological species, it took us 40,000 years to form, and we've been in IT for 20 years. So to reprogram ourselves is not easy. So and we cannot ensure we change this fast. We're still human beings. So there are things, as Alexei has mentioned. How do you develop your hemispheres of your brain? How do you make them developed? A lot of things that have to do with us being human beings, like motorics and being able to work with different media. This is what you form in your childhood while you're 1 to 7 years old. If we don't do it in the primary school, if we don't do it in the secondary school, you cannot expect these people to perform the way you want them to perform in the university.
So in this regard, it sounds trivial, but there's two starting points. First of all, it's slothfulness and the desire to explore. And even though that they sound mutually excluding, in reality, it's some form of unison. Because in education, it's not the technology that matters, not the ways of delivering information. It is the interest, the subject matters. That is the addressee of this information. If we get a student, a school kid, somebody who is trying to study, who doesn't care about this topic, and it doesn't matter who's going to teach that, you're going to end up with terrible results. So in terms of education, we want to talk about individualization. One of them is the adaptive form of education. The adaptive form that first singles out the interest of a human being, it singles out the lacunes in the educational field, and then on top of them, you get the result. The tools of this could be the state information system, like there's creating this source, or the national education project where we create the project for the middle school. So the seamlessness of this, the ability to work with it, the integration of things that are interesting for the Z generation, however you want to call it. It needs different solutions. The digital that comes into education, it doesn't exclude teachers. It changes the roles of the participants in the process, because before, the teacher was the carrier of information, was the alpha and omega. And now, it's a role of a mentor that needs to show and teach how to work with the material and find answers to the questions that are out there. So in terms of data exchange, the data that we've been accumulating, it's an engine. Google and Apple, they're unreachable. You can't catch up with them because they they gather data from different spheres. So the task of the educational track is to become the platform of the data collection that gives access to everyone, and it helps you look for talents and find the individualization. Well, here in Sochi, they're serious. The kids are brought up and they get to university, and then they become average over there because they get lost there within the year or two. Whether it's a mistake of serious, no, it's not. Whether it's a mistake of the higher education, no. But it's some sort of a vicious circle, maybe, because the depersonalization, because if you get everything personalized, and you help break this vicious circle is the key for those who will be able to access the fields they're interested in. Not. I don't want to channel through my own pain, because my daughter just graduated, and 10% of her classmates, they had an idea of where they're going to go in terms of university, yet all of them got somewhere. And you all have to work with those kids. So how much time do you need, Konstantin? I'm done. All right, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted, but we've agreed to follow the timing. One question, as usual, one question. Good afternoon. My name is Svetlana Repina from Central Bank. Procurement, surprisingly. See, I've been listening to various speakers here, and everybody talked about young generation. However, Maria over here said that people are going to live for so long. You know, see, I grew up in Soviet time. I went through all stages of Soviet education, and then I lived through the 90s and the next decade and so on. And I figured that I need to keep getting new knowledge. And this whole accent is being made on young people. But when Konstantin was saying, you're talking about young people that, here they are, they get lost somewhere. But then the older people, they know less than the young people. They need to be getting knowledge. And this problem, you haven't voiced it out. I wanted you to talk about it. Thank you. Well, in terms of psychology, if we take a step back, there's a need for a person to change their activity field. And I mean, it's a commonplace now, and somebody say, you need to change your field entirely. Some say just change your job. But there's different examples. But 3, 4, 5 years, something has to be changed. And as I think, the further development and the change of activity field, they're great. But the development in terms of resource, the higher school gives you this foundation, and then a person, develops. And before something changes in the activity field, it happens in the suture. And it looks like a change. But in reality, what we have to provide for any citizen we're talking about, whether you're talking about young people, it's just easier to illustrate on the young people because they can face that at a stage when it's going to become their natural ambiance. So they would learn to work with the data that they collected. They would learn to share that. They'd learn to provide that. We mentioned, Yandex gets people without higher education. It's a worldwide tendency. Google and Apple, they don't require a higher education to be interested in a person. They need a portfolio. So as citizen, having education to this ambiance where the resources available, they have to understand what to do. You talk about Soviet system. But the problem of choosing the university, it was everywhere. Your generation, my generation, next generation, the problem remains. It's not a generational problem. It's an educational problem. We're going to keep facing up to it because, a person changes, something with a person changes, the trajectory changes. Somebody used to be in design and suddenly finds themselves in a different The spheres change. The military people retire at the age of 40 to 45. They are, in top form, but the civil world doesn't need them. But the ability to re-educate, and it's not difficult solutions because we're working with an adult person. They don't need a fundamental amount of knowledge, but they need to get some sort of a course correction. If we find a labor solution, if we find what they're looking for, then it's going to be easier for us in terms of the demand of the employer. Become the super headhunter. We'll be able to find the suture better because, let's say, a person retiring from the military is great for Rostech. They know how to work with data. They know how to work within the structure, but they don't have this suture. What does the Ministry of Education does? Send them to a university, and then they are off in the labor market looking for a job. But the digital world is the unified ambience where all the data is there, and the knowledge to work with this data is great future. Yandex is good at that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're moving on. And it's wonderful that there's a discussion sparkling. And it's great that we started talking about the generational problems because without touching into this enormous layer, the layer that has to do with the retirement reform, I wanted to say, but the problem of the over-preparation of the older generation. It's very relevant, whether it's the military or whether it's different generations or whether there's relic generations, because I'm stuck somewhere between the generation X and Y, whether it's just the problem of the silver generation, and those who are threatened by retirement in the nearest time. And it's a huge problem, and it covers the entire world. And if through digital we're going to be able to sort of make an inroad in that, it's going to take dozens of brainstorms because it's all very, very complicated. It has to be efficient, has to be comfortable for the people. My friends, it is a huge problem for today that reveals itself everywhere, whether it's in new educational technology. And through this bridge, it is my pleasure to give the floor to our next speaker, Anton Arnautov, CEO of FinTech Lab. And I got a question that's been sort of on my mind. 3 years of successful work in, FinTech MBA degree together with Sberbank. At the same time, it showed all of us that for the entire number of amazing people with stunning technical education that joined this program, plus a foreign language. But we're facing a lack of a number of simple competences. People can't talk. People can't make presentations, moreover. People can't listen, can't hear. And they can't write essays. So the basic skills. And in addition to that, you get the problem of what we talked about before, the critical thinking outside the box. When the first management degree, the kids come in, the winners of the All-Russian contest. They have 100 points at the National Education Unified Test. And then there's, simpler kids that, pay for their education. The first 2 years, those who got 100 points on the national score, they dominate because they know how to absorb information. Third year, when it switches to project method, where you need to make decisions, where you need to work in a team, where you need to take on leadership roles, or get a subdued role, and then you suddenly see that those who have been behind for 2 years, they suddenly jump forth. Now, my question is to Anton. As part of your big experience working in your big FinTech lab, what do you intend to do to teach the new generation to think outside the box? Well, I have my own timer running, thank you. Okay, look. I wouldn't dare to take on the entire generation problem. It's a huge industry that has a lot of educated people working in, so it's not my place to educate them. But see, I recently became an advisor to Yelena Shmilova to work with the banks. The Education Serious Center. It's what we're trying to do to break that vicious circle. What to do with talented school kids who became university students? They're behind not just because they don't know how to do project work, but they also at the second year they lose interest in education because it's become sort of the overall equalizing, but they want to be more personalized. But I'm a practitioner, We take startups and we teach them in 3 months how to launch a pilot with the banks, with their potential customers. And the customer targeting, we're teaching them. Could you please raise your hands, those of you who are in education, whether teach or studies right now, or maybe how many of you work in education? And who is from the business side? Okay, all right. A year ago, I was a part of a similar panel discussion, and I thought I had all the answers. I thought I see a huge gap between the employer and the universities, and I came up with this great idea because as a startup, right? I had this idea of a group project education when a bank sets up a practical task to the university students that work. They study as they work, and they do something that's relevant for the bank. I traveled halfway across the country, traveled from Tomsk to Novosibirsk to Ekaterinburg, to the Southern Federal District, and we launched. We're going to start projects. The banks are going to give them tasks. It's going to be awesome. We launched the pilot. We launched a pilot with 9 universities. Only 2 finished, which is not so bad for a pilot. And the kids from Tomsk, from Tuzur, made a project for Kiwi blockchain technology and for Center Invest. We had a group of students from the Taganrog branch of the Southern Federal University. The rest just got lost. On one hand, because banks have no time for group education, and on the other hand, it's the students that lost motivation halfway through, and it just got lost somewhere. And I thought last year was so simple, so I admit I was wrong. Second thing I'm doing as an advisor of Ms. Shmelova, for the past year, we tried to get those most talented students, we get them an internship. You know how many I personally managed to get internships? I myself, with 20 years of experience of sales of whatever, traveling through the country, I managed to get 1 internship into Otkritia. A total fiasco. Which means, I myself took 4 wonderful kids. Then there are 6 kids we got an internship for at a startup. So what's the problem? Why don't the banks want to prepare anybody? But the question's obvious. Banks don't want to educate. It's not what they do. They make money. So there's a total, gap. On one hand, they're complaining that they don't have people. The universities teach not what they want. But at the same time, they're not ready to put any effort and, turn away from their difficult lives, because it is indeed very difficult. Yeah, it's only from the outside it seems that working in a bank is so easy, but no, it's very hard because they're overloaded with the current tasks. But trying to get some outcome of everything I learned, all of us, universities, banks, we need to walk towards each other again, because I'm talking to universities now. I understood that in order for the banks, finance companies, non-finance companies, in order for them to take kids and develop those kids, we need to repackage those kids. What is an employer interested in? The employer is interested in solving some problem that we have in production right here, right now. And if we switch from group project education offering the bank, let's teach somebody, that's pointless. We're going to teach banks. Let's launch a pilot for you together with the students, because we have already, that's very important, we already have analysts, Java programmers, students, they're all ready. Just give them a task, and they're going to lead them, and they're going to do it for you. Same with the practice or with the internship. It's pointless to say, well, okay, here we have wonderful 10 kids, take them as interns. Yeah, okay. You go to the HR, they need some sort of KPI to fulfill. HR takes those students, goes to the business with them, and that's why business is the business, because they're doing business. So for them, it's a burden. You bring 10 people, I need to, change an application, my system's down, I need to, and then there's 10 people, what the hell am I going to do with them? And again, it's not going to work. So in order for business to take those kids and intern, we need to understand what the business needs today. Let's say they're designing a mobile bank. You look for students who can do routine tasks in the mobile bank design. You go to an employer and say, here, look, I have a group of kids. They're ready. And this is when they start learning something that they're going to use in real life, because that's when those who are their potential employers, they start working with them. They walk right into it, and they'll possibly start getting new skills. So my time is running out. And when it comes to indisciplinary approach, Sirius does have a practice when the hockey players, as their relaxation, listen to math lectures. In Sirius, it's called some sort of entertainment program, and the mathematicians take a puck and go play hockey. Helps greatly. Thank you.
Thank you. And one question. Alexei Minyailov, VTB Bank. I think your initiative is very sound. Let us package students into teams and invite them to banks to solve some application, some applicable tasks. You can work on analytical tasks as well. Nobody needs them, scattered without team experience, without soft skills, without, a skill to socialize in a big organization with its own internal bureaucracy. Do you think the bank would trust the people who are not yet graduates? I mean, who have not yet graduated from university? Will the bank entrust them with solving some business challenges, the business tasks, and the tasks that influence the KPIs or influence the bank personnel jobs? I think your questions shows this barrier that exists between the students and the banks. Together with your colleagues, Sergei Lukashkin and Lavrov, we worked on organizing Youth Day here in Finnopolis, and we were working on the cases we presented to them, and they had a chance to solve these cases over the period of 3 weeks. We had colleagues from 14 banks, and many of them were really impressed by the level of the solutions that the students provided. And here they also had hackathon when they provided the solution within 3 hours. They have skills, they have education, they are ready to learn, and they want to be interns in banks, but yet we're searching for a common language. Colleagues, we have one presenter. So let's say we have a presentation, and then we'll have free mic. So put down your questions. Let us do the question. Volga Vyatsky, Department of the Bank of Russia. We do take students as interns. We organize university competitions, and we took 10 students, 10 graduates from the High School of Economics, people who had been educated in econometrics, in mathematical analysis, and before we have a board meeting, and the level is different from university, differs from university to university, but we're working on involving students, so we're actually for students, not against them. Well, it's great. We're having a discussion here. Just a small comment from a practitioner, and I'm a candidate of economic sciences. But after Harvard Business School, I did my PhD in psychology and management psychology. In any collective, in any group, the number of leaders, if you have more leaders than 15, 20%, it becomes destructive. Elon Musk's quote about fast-growing structures always being a result of systemic work and a bit of chaos. So people who think out of the box, they bring this creative disruption. I'm not talking about banking system here, but I can say about education. I know that the number of outstanding professors should not be the percentage should not be higher than 15%. Otherwise, they would disrupt all the programs. I mean, you can have stars, performing on stage, but you won't make them play in the orchestra where you have, first violins, yes, but The rest are, are moderate but skillful players. So just to draw your attention to the fact that the system is social. I'm not providing a solution. I'm just drawing your attention. Social system is you take is very suspicious in terms of stars and geniuses. Remember those, genius kids from schools who would enroll into universities. Many of them later, actually realized their potential. They did get into a different social milieu, into a different social environment that would reprogram them. Then they had a choice whether you stay isolated or you adapt in a Darwin sense. So if we're having talents, we need to think of an environment we could have for these talented students. And then we should think what should be the proportion of these talents in relation to, people in the middle, skillful experts in the middle. What should the proportion be? And it depends on the vision that the organizational leadership would have. And now I'm very happy to give the floor to our last presenter and expert, not last but not the least. I would give the floor to the Vice President of the Bank of Russia, Ruslan Vesterovsky. Thank you, Sergey. Good afternoon, colleagues. I have a couple of ideas to share and a slide. It's my third time at Finapolis, and each year, the people agenda is growing. We're having our second Youth Day, and I want to thank Andre for this idea, and there's a huge interest among employers. Our bank is becoming very compact, but we have a high demand for new types of skills, for new teams. We're now working on our economic departments in all over the country. So we have a high demand for talented graduates. And we also launch new hubs, new development centers all over the country. So it's also an option. So we're becoming smaller, but we're looking for a different kind of stuff. What is important is that we concentrate, we focus on educating grown-up people, educating adults. This is our core competence, and we invest a lot into it. It's one of the examples. We've launched leadership stages or leadership steps program, and some of the speakers you saw yesterday, they work at this program. What does it involve? Soft skills, ability to make decisions, cybersecurity, everything that has to do with fintech and other components. So we give both hard skills and soft skills and other competences, enabling our leaders to develop within the organization. 1,300 leaders or executives will go through this corporate university. Universities' main business are students, but 80% of people working in an organization are acting personnel. I'm 38. Whatever I do now, I've learned over the past 6 years. Things I knew before are no longer relevant. So you need to keep up. You need to educate yourself. It's like sport. You need to be, you need to keep up. Otherwise, you fall out of the competitive environment, and you won't be in demand in the market anymore. Finapolis is the name we have. Maybe a year after this, we'll call it FinaPeople. So this is something we're heading to. And I feel happy seeing that it correlates very well with what Bank of Russia is doing. We've achieved a strategy with visions and goals, and with two components, people and technologies. So we see ourselves as a high-tech regulator. So we're developing both. And I asked my colleagues to do a piece of analytics. This year, we've launched a university. It has become a separate department within the company for and I asked my colleagues to give an overview of our long-distance programs. And we had 4,000 people working in the company who've been trained in cybersecurity, 2,500 in corporate values. So we have a big range of courses, cyber values. So this is what the personnel demanded themselves. This is my master class. When I had it, my master class during the youth day. We made express analysis between students. We had some students and some colleagues. So we decided to do a SWOT analysis of ourselves, discovering our strong and weak points. And here you see the answers we got. Strong points, teamwork. Maybe, I mean, the people who answered these questions, they were trained to do that. Mobility, flexibility, adaptive skills, and being able to solve complex challenges, complex problems. Weaknesses, soft competences, soft skills. This is something people in tech are often lacking. How they interact, how they give feedback, how they work with clients. Emotional intelligence. This will always be a reality. The higher you go up in the hierarchy of the organization, the more you involve your emotional intellect. And being multicultural, being able to work in various cultural milieu. Training and forms and internship are threats. Geopolitical risks were mentioned among possible threats, which was a surprise for me to see. But I think that educational system is not really influenced, but these risks still exist. And lack of certain competences and skills, they reflect the competition for jobs. Sometimes you have 800 people applying for a job for one working place. And one of the employers mentioned that central bank, we're second top ranking employer. We never hired. We didn't used to hire from the market. Now, since we're forming new departments and we're looking into the market, we're looking into the future employees, and it turned out that we have a firm stand. We are repositioning ourselves in this market, so we are working on to attract people. We want people to come. People are coming to us because they see us as a stable and sustainable working place, but we also want them to come to us because we are interesting. In general, I would like to wish us all that the companies should build up their strategies in terms of employee management, attracting right graduates and right people for positions. And I think we should not save or cut on investment into universities, or we should and training. We should create options for development within the companies as well. Thank you very much. I think we're running out of time. Can we have another 10 minutes? Because we need to give a chance to ask the questions. 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay, we have 5 minutes. The question is to Ruslan Vesterovsky. Maybe, well, let's have questions for all presenters, for all speakers. My name is Ekaterina Melnikov. I'm from Sberbank. My question is, everybody, draws attention to the fact that the young generation lacks soft skills. In your opinion, does it mean that we need to develop soft skills in the universities, or should we invest more within the companies to develop soft skills? Or maybe we should change our business, maybe we should communicate less. Well, I think we should start from the clients. If you don't communicate, you sell less. In terms of where this should be done, well, I think that universities can do part of it. You know, while you're in the university, during the 6 years, this is the time when you develop the soft skills. Speaking of corporate universities, it's another platform. I think it should be done in both places, both in the universities and within the companies as well. Or we could think of a third scenario when you yourself invest into your own soft skill development. And I also had one more question to Konstantin Kozlov. There was a competition between the people asking questions. Well, Konstantin, first of all, thank you for the national platform, Open Education. It's a huge opportunity not only for students, but mainly for adults, because we know what courses we would choose. My question is, you mentioned adaptive education. Do you have any running projects or perspectives in terms of adaptive education? The platform for adaptive education has been completed for healthcare. It's also fragmented because education in healthcare, in medicine, is provided for by several universities, and they're responsible for training and for post-degree training. And we are thinking of creating one single platform. Speaking of adaptive education, I would not focus on one single area. The technology we have now, when we test a person and realize what are his strengths and weaknesses are, and we're seeing a breakthrough in this area. So adaptivity is a toolkit to work with a person, with an actual person, responding to their own requirements, to their own demands. There are certain professional demands. In my ideal world, a person is initially, has initial inclinations to be an artist, to be a poet, to be a banking official. Adaptivity is the way you act within an organization. It has to do more with psychoanalytics and with the ability to understand strengths and weaknesses of a person. Thank you very much. Vasily Terech, Citilim Bank, digital transformation and marketing. I would draw a bridge from innovation to education. We've been talking a lot about innovation, but still we all understand that all innovative products are involve investment with and their economic outcome is very hard to calculate. But economic effect is something we are aiming at eventually. Do we need or should we train students in the tech universities in this respect? My question is to Maria. An interesting question. And many colleagues, we work with many banks, are trying to solve it. Innovations and new technologies cannot be, put into money. So getting back to students' training, if a student is strong in tech, they are not always able to find their idea. How do you find it? I think that social skills are very important here. Ability to speak, speech culture, and basic basics, basic business skills, promoting your ideas. Technology, on the other hand, does not always bring profit. I mean, especially if we're talking about new technology. Getting back to the yesterday's plenary discussion, how do we create infrastructure? This is something that the president of the Bank of Russia said. Fintech and startups and new ideas. How do we make students, graduate students, and MBA students participate in this? We had a very positive experience with the Zenit Bank. We launched a hackathon for MBA at the highest school of economics, and we suggested there was a group of 30 people. We had 27 attendants, and Bank Zenit announced that 3 students who come up with the best innovative ideas will have internship and jobs later. There was a press release about this hackathon, and the student, this loyalty program that has been launched between Tatneft and Zenit Bank was generated within the framework of this hackathon in February 2018. And I think, yes, we should train them, but on what level? And maybe we shouldn't start with freshmen. And what jobs are we training them for? What professions are we training them for? Well, dear friends, unfortunately, we are out of time. And I would just add, I would like to draw your attention that investing in education, we need to make them more efficient. But investing in education are less risky because they are not the subject of sanctions. They cannot be expropriated. They always remain with the people they were made into. They remain with them in a form of skills, in the form of their talents, of their competences. I'm very grateful to all the participants, and I'm very grateful to the panelists. I think that the issues, the challenges we've discussed today are not the questions or the problems that can be solved in one particular way. In the book by Soviet sci-fi writers, they describe a department which works with unsolvable problems. And if you ask why should you try to solve problems which are solvable? We are here working on a multifaceted problem, and today's discussion allowed us to have a different perspective. I think we've heard a lot of important thoughts, and I hope we take them with us and we'll carry them out and we'll use them and apply them in our everyday practice. And as a moderator, I'd like to say thank you to all participants of today's roundtable. I want to say thank you to the organizers, to the people who are sitting there in the corner, the organizers of Phinopolis, who are making things work. I want to extend my gratitude to the people this is all made for. I wanted to talk in client-oriented terms. I'm talking about you, colleagues. You being interested gave sense and drive to the discussion. Thank you, and I suggest we applaud each other. Thank you for your support.